12th Man Podcast. Let's talk sports. Let's go. The 12th Man Podcast.
Good afternoon, gentlemen. This is Coach Doug coming to you live from beautiful College Station, Texas, with your 12-Man Podcast for Week 4. This episode of your 12-Man Podcast is brought to you proudly by 1835 Bourbon. 1835 Bourbon, Texan made, Texan proud. 1835 Bourbon, come and take it. Going to jump into the ACC for your score recaps of Week 3. Number 15, North Carolina at Tennessee. North Carolina put it on the balls with a final score. North Carolina 54, Tennessee 35. Number 18, Georgia Tech hosting their FCS opponent. They scored 48 while holding the FCS team to 10 for a 48-10 victory. FCS opponent for Clemson, number 13, Clemson at home. They scored 77 and hold their FCS opponent to 10. Let's take a quick look at the stats on the day. Clemson had 31 first downs. They had 711 yards of total offense. They had 137 rushing yards, 4 rushing touchdowns, added 574 passing yards through the air with 7 receiving touchdowns, and they averaged 12.1 yards of play on the day as they ran 59 plays. They also went 5 of 8 for 62% on third down conversions. Now here's a big matchup. Number 16, Pittsburgh, at number 10, Ole Miss. It was all Ole Miss early and often. As Ole Miss put up 35 in the first quarter, it was 35-0. But Pittsburgh stormed back, and it was 42-21 at the half. Then it was 49-28 after 3, and Pittsburgh added 21 for good measure in the fourth, but they still fell short as the Ole Miss Rebels pull it out 56-49. Ole Miss put up 489 yards of total offense, 204 rushing yards with 2 rushing touchdowns. They added 285 passing yards and 4 passing touchdowns through the air. They were 3 of 8 on third down conversions for 37%. And they averaged 10.6 yards per play on the day. Looking over at the Pittsburgh offense, they had 511 yards of total offense. They ran 58 plays, averaging 8.8 yards a play. They only rushed the ball for 45 yards, but 3 rushing touchdowns. A 2.5 yard per rush average, which was pretty dismal on the day, and part of the reason they probably didn't make the comeback a win. But let's take a look at now their passing. They threw for 466 passing yards on the day and 3 passing touchdowns. And they went 3 of 10 for 30% on third down conversions. Now we look at the big matchup. Florida at Georgia. What a game. 24-14. The Seminoles down the Bulldogs at home in Athens. 12 first downs for Florida State. They had 284 yards of total offense. They ran 39 plays, 7.3 yards a play. They only rushed for 34 rushing yards on the day, a 1.9 average. They also threw for 250 passing yards and 1 passing touchdown and went 2 of 6 for 33% on third downs. Georgia had 19 first downs, 360 yards of total offense. They ran 68 plays for 5.3 yards of play average. They rushed for 123 rushing yards, but no rushing touchdowns. And they threw for another 237 passing yards through the air and 1 passing touchdown. Georgia was 5 of 14 for 35% on the day. It was 7-0 at the half, Florida State. After 3, it was Georgia 14, Florida State 10. But let me tell you what happened in the fourth quarter. Florida State had to punt the ball after after Georgia scored a touchdown. They punted the ball away, but that was all there was to it because the free safety for Florida laid the Georgia punt returner out. And let me tell you, it was a fumble all the way to the house for the Florida State Seminoles, who took a lead and never looked back. Now we're going to jump over to the Big 12, number 11, Texas A&M at home against Kansas. Texas A&M pulls out the win 52-31 in a game that was ugly. We'll take a look at the stats real quick. 31 first downs for Texas A&M, 613 yards of total offense. They ran 61 plays, averaged 10 yards a play. They rushed for 341 rushing yards and 3 rushing touchdowns. And they added 272 passing yards to the air with 4 passing touchdowns. Texas A&M went 9-10 for 90% on the day. The problem was they gave up 483 yards of total offense to the Kansas Jayhawks, who averaged 7.8 yards a play on the day. Kansas ran for 93 rushing yards and 1 rushing touchdown and passed for a whopping 390 passing yards and 3 passing touchdowns against the Aggies. Kansas was also 5 of 11 for 45% on third down conversions. Now we jump over to the Big Ten. Michigan at number 2 Penn State. It was a good game. 7-0 Michigan after 1. 14-7 Michigan over Penn State at the half. Then it was 17-14 after 3, but that's when Penn State made their fourth quarter comeback and they won the game 28-25. Nittany Lions cover at home over Michigan. Penn State put up 339 yards of total offense. They averaged 7.2 yards per play on the day. They had 142 rushing yards, 1 rushing touchdown. They threw for 197 passing yards and 3 passing touchdowns while converting 4 of 8 third down conversions for 50%. Michigan had 381 yards of total offense, averaged 9.1 yards a play. They only rushed for 25 yards on the day and a dismal 1.8 yards a carry. But they added 356 passing yards and 3 passing touchdowns. And they were 4 of 7 for 57% on third down conversions on the day. Now we look number 4, Oregon at Oregon State in the rivalry game. Oregon put it on the Beavers and never looked back. 49-16 Oregon. Let's take a look at some stats real quick for you. Oregon had 20 first downs, 527 yards of total offense. They averaged 10.3 yards a play on the day. They rushed for 163 rushing yards, 2 rushing touchdowns while averaging over 7 yards a carry on the day. They also added 364 passing yards for 5 receiving touchdowns. And the Oregon Ducks went 4 for 7 on third down conversions for 57%. Now we take a look at the next game. Number 5, Notre Dame hosted their FCS opponent at home. Notre Dame put up 70 and held their FCS opponent to only 6 points on the day. Notre Dame had 36 first downs, put up 695 yards of total offense. They ran 61 plays with 11.4 yards an average on plays. They ran for 194 rushing yards, 3 rushing touchdowns, and averaged almost 10 yards a rush on the day. They also added 501 passing yards and 7 passing touchdowns as the Irish wallop their FCS opponent at home. Notre Dame only had 3 third downs on the day. They converted 2 of them. 2 of 3 on third down conversions for 66%. Washington at Washington State in the Apple Cup. Washington pulls out the big victory, 56-13 over their in-state rival. Let's take a quick look at the stats. Washington had 26 first downs. They had 700 yards of total offense, ran 61 plays for 11.5 yards an average. They ran for 368 rushing yards, 5 rushing touchdowns, and they also threw for 332 passing yards and 2 passing touchdowns on the day. They also went 4 of 9 on third down conversions for 44%. USC, number 1 overall in the nation, hosted Hawaii Rainbow Warriors. It was ugly, early and often. 63, USC, Hawaii 10. 553 yards of total offense for the Trojans. They had 75 total plays, averaging 7.4 yards a play. They ran the ball for 253 rushing yards and 4 rushing touchdowns while averaging 7.7 yards a rush. They also added 300 passing yards through the air and 5 passing touchdowns, as the Trojans also went 4 of 10 on third down conversions for only 40%. Now we're going to jump over to the SEC. Looking into the SEC, number 9, Oklahoma at Arkansas. It was ugly. Oklahoma 55 and Arkansas 7. Oklahoma put up 325 yards of total offense, averaged 6.9 yards a play. They rushed the ball for 108 rushing yards and 3 rushing touchdowns, but only a 3.2 yards a carry average on the day for them. They threw the ball for 217 passing yards and 3 passing touchdowns, and they went 4 of 9 on third down conversions for 44%. Arkansas on the day struggled on offense. 196 yards of total offense, 51 plays. They averaged 3.8 yards a play on the day. They had 7 carries for -3 rushing yards, for a -0.4 average on rushes. But they tried to throw the ball 44 times and only completed 14 for 199 passing yards and 1 passing touchdown. The Arkansas Razorbacks went 4 of 12 on third down conversions for 33%. The story of that game, folks, was turnovers. Number three Alabama at home, hosting their FCS opponent. It was 77 for the Roll Tide to 7 for their opponent. Let's take a quick look at the stats. The Alabama Crimson Tide had 32 first downs, 781 yards of total offense. They ran 63 plays for 12.4 yards and average on the day. They had 489 rushing yards, 7 rushing touchdowns, and they averaged over 13 yards a carry on the ground. They added 292 passing yards and 4 passing touchdowns, while going only 3 of 7 on third down conversions for 42%. Number 12, Florida, and number 23, Texas. Florida goes to Austin and stuns the Longhorns 38-17. LSU at home against Maryland, and they pull out a close one, 42-35. Now we're going to jump back real quick to the ACC, and we're going to look at Week 4 matchups. Number 18, Georgia Tech has Texas Tech at home. Number 10, Ole Miss at Virginia Tech. Number 16, Pittsburgh at home against their FCS opponent. Georgia hosts number 13, Clemson, and Arizona State Sun Devils host the Tennessee Volunteers. Looking at the Big 10, the Big 12. The Big 12, number 11, Texas A&M hosts Illinois. Auburn hosts Kansas State. Now we look at the Big 10. Michigan at Maryland. Number 2, Penn State at number 1, USC. That is your game of the week. That is one to watch. That is the game that you want to see. That is the game that could be your national championship showdown ahead of time. Number 6, Ohio State gets number 25, BYU at home. Number 4, Oregon gets Houston at home. Now let's jump down to the SEC and take the last look at this. Number 8, UCF at Akron. Arkansas at Missouri. Number 7, Miami has their FCS opponent at home. And here's your next game of the week. Number 3, Alabama at number 9, Oklahoma. And this just in, folks, that game has gone final. Oklahoma 38, Alabama 24. And number 23, Texas, is at Mississippi State. Now let's jump over and do your quick Heisman watch. Let's see how it's shuffled around. Haas Hedgeny of Texas A&M has jumped up into the number 1 overall spot in the Heisman race. Last week, he wasn't even in the top 5. Winston Watkins Jr., the halfback for Ole Miss, has jumped up from 4 to number 2. Tavion St. Clair dropped from 1 to 3. And Bryce Baker dropped from 2 to 4. And Ian Akpakawarak of Clemson, the quarterback, freshman, redshirt, has jumped into the top 5. And that is your Heisman update for Week 4. Okay, now we're going to take a quick look, folks. Here's your top 3 offensive and defensive performances of the week. Let's get through it, and let's get through it quick. Alabama running back, the AK Express, AK Deer, had 13 carries, 171 rushing yards, 3 rushing touchdowns, and he averaged 13.2 yards a carry on the day. He also had 7 broken tackles and 2 20-plus yard runs. Oregon wide receiver, Liati Lights Out Otau. 5 receptions, 218 receiving yards, and 2 receiving touchdowns. And Texas A&M quarterback Big Hoss Hedgeny brought the Hoss of pain against Kansas. He went 20 of 26 for 76%, 272 passing yards, 4 passing touchdowns with no interceptions, and he had 7 carries for 132 rushing yards and 2 rushing touchdowns. And now for your top 3 defensive performances. Oklahoma quarterback Jeremiah the Bomb Newcomb. He had 3 tackles, 2 interceptions, and 1 pass breakup, and a defensive touchdown on the day. USC linebacker Caleb On Durham. The Trojan Tank had 9 tackles, 3 tackles for loss, and a sack for USC. And your last defensive performance of the week, Florida State free safety Lorenzo Knutson. now known as the Seminole Sniper for his vicious hit on the Georgia punt returner that forced a fumble that helped win the game for Florida State. He had 11 tackles, 1 interception, in that brutal forced fumble, which led to a Florida State touchdown. And now we also have 2 ouch performances of the week. Ouch performance of the week number 1 goes to Oregon quarterback Julian Lewis, who went 17 of 28 for 60%, 364 passing yards, 5 passing touchdowns, but he threw 5 interceptions on the day, earning him an ouch performance of the week. And Arkansas quarterback Quandre Short went 14 of 44 for 31%, 199 passing yards, 1 passing touchdown, but he threw 7 interceptions, earning him the second ouch performance of the week here for week 4. All right, everybody, this is Coach Dub. Until next time, this is Coach Dub signing off.